Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that I bet a lot of you have come across, especially if you're, someone who's really into learning and finding better ways to learn. It's gamification.
Gamification.
Yeah, you've heard of this.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's this idea of taking the fun stuff from games, points, badges, levels, and using them in everyday situations that aren't actually games, especially in education. You see it everywhere now.
It's everywhere. Yeah, it's like, is it really making learning better, or is it, just the shiny new thing that everyone's excited about, but maybe doesn't actually, you know, help us learn more effectively?
Right, like a fad.
Yeah.
Is it just the latest buzzword, or is there something real to it? That's exactly what we're going to try to figure out today.
Yeah, that's the big question.
So to really get to the bottom of this, we found a really cool study. It's actually a meta-analysis, which is super helpful because it means they didn't just do one study. They looked at a ton of studies on gamification.
Right, it's like a study of studies.
Yes.
So you get a much broader perspective, more evidence to work with.
Yeah, so this meta-analysis was done by Michael Saylor and Lisa Homner. It came out in 2020, and it was published in the Educational Psychology Review. And what they did was look at all this research and try to see, how well does gamification actually work for learning? And not just, does it make you feel good, which, feeling good is good, but does it actually help you, understand things better?
Right. Does it actually improve your learning outcomes, like what you actually take away from the experience?
Yeah, exactly. And they broke it down into three main areas, which I think is super useful. Cognitive outcomes, which is basically your understanding, how well you grasp the concepts.
Like the mental processes involved.
Exactly. And then motivational outcomes. So are you more engaged? Are you more interested in the topic? Do you feel more confident about learning it?
And then finally, behavioral outcomes, which is more about your skills and how well you actually perform the task or apply what you've learned in real-world situations.
So, okay, I'm dying to know. After looking at all this research, did they find that gamification actually helps us learn? What's the verdict?
Well, the main finding is that gamification does seem to have a small but significant positive effect across all three of those areas we talked about: cognitive, motivational, and behavioral.
So it's not like this huge, massive improvement, but there is a real measurable benefit.
Yeah, it's not a magic bullet, but it does give you a bit of an edge. Like, it's not going to turn you into a genius overnight,
Yeah.
but it does seem to help a little bit on average.
Can you give us some idea of how much of an edge it gives you?
Yeah, so for cognitive learning, like how well you understand and remember things, they found that gamification could make you almost half a standard deviation better than, more traditional methods.
Okay.
And they use this measure called Hedges G, which basically tells you how big the effect is. So here it was 0.49, and that falls within a confidence interval of 0.30 to 0.69, meaning the real effects probably falls somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And the larger that G number, generally the bigger the impact.
Right, that makes sense. So it's not a tiny effect, but it's not a huge one either.
Right, somewhere in between.
Okay, and what about the motivation part? Do people feel more pumped about learning when it's gamified?
So for motivation, they found a Hedges G of 0.36 with a confidence interval of 0.18 to 0.54.
Okay.
So again, it's a positive effect, but maybe not quite as strong as the cognitive one, though still definitely something.
Okay, and what about the behavioral stuff, actual skills?
For that, the Hedges G was 0.25, so a little smaller, but still positive impact, And the confidence interval for that one was 0.04 to 0.46.
All right, so overall, gamification seems to be doing some good, but, I remember you saying that the results weren't, super consistent across all the studies.
Yeah, there was definitely some variation.
What do you mean by that?
They found what they call heterogeneity in the results, which means, some studies showed a big benefit, some showed a smaller one, and some maybe even showed no benefit at all.
Oh, interesting.
And they use this thing called I values to measure this inconsistency. And a high I means there was a lot of variation.
Right, so basically, it's not like a guarantee. Gamification might be great in some situations and not so much in others.
Yeah, exactly. It really depends on a lot of factors. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
Okay, so it's not just about adding games, it's about adding them in the right way.
Yeah.
Which brings us to what the study calls moderating factors.
Moderating factors, yeah.
What are those?
So these are basically the things that make gamification more or less effective.
Okay.
Like it depends factors, right? So they looked at a bunch of these to try and figure out what makes gamification really work.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these it depends factors. The first one they looked at was inclusion of game fiction. What does that even mean?
So that's basically like adding a story to the learning experience.
Right.
Like imagine you're learning about history, but instead of just reading a textbook, you're playing a game where you're a time traveler or, you're solving math problems, but it's part of like a detective story.
Oh, okay, so it's like putting the learning into a more engaging context,
Right.
right?
It's making it feel more like a game.
Okay, so did having these fictional elements actually make a difference in how much people learned?
Surprisingly, it didn't have a huge impact on cognitive learning, like actually understanding the concepts.
Okay.
And it also didn't really affect motivation that much either.
Oh, that's interesting. You'd think a good story would make people more excited to learn, right?
Yeah, you'd think so.
Mm.
But here's the thing. It did have a pretty significant effect on behavioral learning, like how well people could perform the actual tasks and skills.
Okay, so the story didn't necessarily help them understand the concept better, but it did help them actually do the thing.
Exactly. Though the researchers said it might be because the story just made the activity itself more fun, so people put more effort into it during the learning, not necessarily that they got better at the skill itself long term.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, if you're more into the story, you're going to be more present while you're learning.
Right.
Okay, interesting. What was the next factor?
The next one was social interaction,
Yeah.
like whether people were competing against each other, collaborating, working together, or doing it all solo.
Oh, okay. So, like, are you learning with others or are you doing it by yourself? And did that make a difference in how effective the gamification was?
So for cognitive and motivational outcomes, the type of social interaction didn't seem to have a big impact.
Okay.
But when they looked at behavioral outcomes, there was this really interesting pattern. They found that combining competition with collaboration was way more effective than just learning alone.
Oh, wow. So not just competition, but competition and working together.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting. When they looked at the studies that were really well designed, like the ones that were more rigorous, this benefit of combining those two things, competition and collaboration, was even stronger. And it actually beat out just having competition by itself for both motivation and behavioral outcomes.
Oh, wow. That is super interesting. So if you really want to get motivated and really want to improve your skills, just competing might not be the best way to go.
Yeah, it seems like you need that extra element of teamwork to make it work.
That makes sense, right? Because it gives you that kind of drive to do well, but also that support system to help you along the way.
Right. And the researchers think this might be because it taps into like our human need to belong and connect with others, while still having that drive to achieve and be successful.
Yeah, it's like healthy competition.
Exactly. It's a more constructive way to do it. But of course, it's important to design that competition carefully. Like if there are huge differences in people's skills, it could end up being demotivating for some.
Right, it could backfire.
Yeah.
Okay, what else did they look at?
So they also look at what they call the learning arrangement of the comparison group.
Okay, what does that mean?
It basically means what were the people who weren't getting the gamified learning doing? Like, were they just listening to a lecture, or were they actively doing exercises, or was it like a mix of both?
Okay, and did that influence how effective the gamification seemed to be?
So for both cognitive and motivational outcomes, they didn't find any significant differences based on what the comparison group was doing.
Okay.
So it could be that gamification, in a lot of cases, isn't necessarily designed to be like more deeply engaging than other active learning methods.
Oh, that's an interesting point. So maybe just adding those game elements doesn't make it automatically better than, say, like actively working through problems or having a discussion.
Yeah, it's something to think about. It's like, is gamification really pushing people to that deeper level of thinking compared to other ways of learning?
Okay, so what about time? Does the length of the gamification matter?
Yeah, so they looked at that too. They called it the period of time or duration. And for cognitive and behavioral outcomes, the length of time didn't seem to have a big impact.
Okay.
But for motivational outcomes, they did find something interesting. Longer interventions, like those that lasted up to half a year, actually showed bigger positive effects than really short ones, like just one day or less.
Oh, okay. So if you're thinking about using gamification, it might be better to do it over a longer period if you want to see those motivational benefits.
Right. And this is good news for people who are worried about, the novelty wearing off.
Mm,
Like, does the excitement of gamification fade away quickly?
right.
It seems like it can actually have a longer lasting impact on
I
motivation.
yes to know. What was next?
They also looked at the research context, meaning like where the learning was taking place. Was it a school, university, workplace, or even just an informal setting?
Oh, okay. Interesting. And did the environment have any effect on the outcomes?
Yeah, it seemed to matter for cognitive outcomes. Gamification had a stronger positive effect on understanding and applying knowledge in school settings compared to like higher education or informal settings.
What do you think that might be?
They think it might be because of how the control groups were set up in those different places.
Hmm.
Like in schools, the comparison group might have been more likely to just get traditional instruction, like lectures.
Oh,
Whereas in higher ed, it might have been more active learning approaches already.
okay. So if you're comparing gamification to something that's less engaging, the difference might seem bigger.
Right. What about the impact on motivation and behavior across those different contexts?
Yeah. Did they find anything there?
For those outcomes, they didn't see any big differences across the contexts.
Okay, so environment matters for cognitive outcomes, but not so much for the others.
It seems that way, yeah. And then the last thing they looked at was the methodological rigor of the studies.
What does that mean?
It's basically about how well designed the studies were. Like, did they use random assignment where people are put into groups randomly? What was the overall design of the study? And what kind of assessments did they use?
Oh, okay. So it's all about how trustworthy the results are.
Exactly. And this is where it gets kind of tricky. So random assignment didn't seem to affect the cognitive outcomes. But studies that didn't use random assignment, like what they call quasi-experimental studies, actually showed bigger effects for motivational and behavioral outcomes than the ones that did use random assignment.
Oh, that's weird. You'd think the more rigorous studies would give you a better picture, right?
Yeah, it's a little counterintuitive. And it just goes to show that we need to be careful when interpreting these findings. It could be that there are other things going on in those non-randomized studies that are making the gamification seem more effective for motivation and behavior.
Okay.
Like maybe the people who chose to be in the gamified group were already more excited about learning in general.
Right, that makes sense.
So it's not a simple answer. What about the study design itself? Like whether they compared learning before and after the gamification?
Yeah, did that matter?
They didn't find that the design or the type of assessments used had any big effects overall. But when they focused on the studies with the strongest designs, like the really rigorous ones, the positive effects for motivation and behavior weren't quite as strong as they were for cognitive learning.
Oh, okay. So it's like when you really zoom in on the best research, the benefits for motivation and behavior become a little less certain, but the positive impact on understanding still seems pretty solid.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But even with the more rigorous studies, did they still find that combining competition and collaboration was a good thing?
Yes, absolutely. Even in the most rigorous studies, that benefit was still there. So it seems like that's a pretty reliable finding.
Okay, so after looking at all of that, like all of that research, what are the key takeaways for people who want to learn more effectively?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that gamification can be a really useful tool to help you learn better.
Okay.
It's not just some silly fad. There's real evidence to back it up.
But there's a catch, right? Like, it's not just about slapping on some game features and calling it a day.
Yeah, exactly. How you design the gamification is super important. Just adding points and badges without really thinking about it isn't going to cut it. You have to integrate those game elements with the learning goals in a meaningful way.
It's got to be more than just like making it superficially fun.
Yeah, it's got to be like strategically fun.
Yeah, and also thinking about what you want to achieve. Like if you're focused on building skills or getting people more engaged with the task, those behavioral outcomes, then adding a story or some fictional elements might be a good move, even if it doesn't directly make them understand the concept better.
Right. The narrative can be a powerful motivator.
Totally. And then, of course, the social interaction piece. Combining competition with collaboration seems like a real winner, but you got to be careful about how you set it up.
Yeah, you don't want to create a toxic competitive environment.
Exactly. It's got to be supportive and constructive. And it seems like the longer you can keep the gamification going, the better the motivational benefits, which is good to know.
Yeah, for sure. And it's important to remember that the context matters too. Like where you're learning might influence how effective the gamification is, especially for those cognitive outcomes.
Right. And finally, I think it's important to note that there's still more research to be done. We need more high-quality studies to really understand all the nuances of how and why gamification works.
Yeah, absolutely. This is an ongoing area of research.
So, to wrap things up, gamification definitely has potential to make learning better,
Hmm.
but it's not just about throwing in random game features. You got to be smart about it, think about what you want to achieve, how to design those game elements, and the overall learning context.
Right. It's all about thoughtful design and implementation.
Yeah, and I think that's a great takeaway for our listeners too. Like, think about your own experiences with gamification, whether it's in an educational setting or even just, everyday apps you use.
Yeah, like how did those game elements make you feel? Did they make you want to learn more? Did they help you understand something better? Did they make you more likely to stick with it?
Exactly. And to leave you with something to think about, consider this. Based on everything we've talked about today, what's one assumption you might want to reconsider about how we design learning experiences, whether it's for yourself or for others?
Food for thought.
Yeah, food for thought. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into gamification. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring. And if you're curious to learn more, we encourage you to explore further, maybe dive into some of those research studies we mentioned.
Yeah, keep that curiosity going.
All right, until next time, happy learning.
Happy learning.